Hello and thank you for watching. This is Ariel Adamson of Rogue Tech. Today we're going to be covering Red-Green Monsters by Donovan Blaney. Donovan has been playing this deck since roughly a week before game day. It has evolved quite a bit over the weeks, but has consistently pulled 4-1 or greater at our FNMs, gotten first place twice, as well as top-8 2 game days. Now, it shares a lot of similarities to your regular red-green monsters, starting off with 3 Voyaging Satyr, really good with Nykthos, 4 Sylvan Caryatid, great color fixer, as well as the hexproof protects his mana dorks, which is very relevant in a rapidly growing removal-heavy format, as well as the 3 toughness allows it to be relevant against the aggressive decks as well. Burning-Tree Emissary, 3 of which I altered myself. Very good with devotion, as well as being aggressive in the controlling matches and defensive in the aggressive matches. Now we're going to start getting into the monsters here. 4 Stormbreath, pretty much an absolute must. The haste in Pro White, very relevant. In my opinion, the haste is definitely the most relevant because dealing 4 damage just out of the blue is very powerful. And because this is a Nykthos deck, sometimes you can even monstrous it in the same turn. Polukranos, there's only 2 in here right now. We have toyed with the idea of adding a 3rd, just haven't really found the slot for it. He's very good against the creature-heavy decks, but finds himself coming out a lot in the less creature-heavy decks, because he's just kind of eaten up by the removal. Now to help synergize with these monsters, we've got 3 Kalonian Hydra. They're very good and powerful by themselves. They can end the game just by dropping and sticking, but they become even better when monstrosing something else. Then one of the more recent additions is 4 Witchstalker. Witchstalker is relevant for a few reasons. One, again, the hexproof comes into play because there's so much removal floating around, as well as the 3 toughness being very, very relevant in the aggressive matches, as the average attacking creature right now is only 2 power and 2 toughness. Then we've got 2 Sylvan Primordial. This was an addition that I actually pushed for. They are very, very powerful, especially in the more controlling matches where they don't have access to any mana ramp, such as mono black blowing up their land with a Underworld connections and going to grab another land usually sets them just way too far behind to recover. Then moving into the Planeswalkers, we've got 4 Xenagos. He is relevant in every single match. The mana ramp allows these larger creatures to be cast for sure, as well as putting 2/2 creatures into play either as attackers or defenders. Then we've got 3 Garruk. There are no Domri in this deck. Garruk pretty much serves as a giant Domri, grabbing 5 cards, or close to 5 cards on a regular basis, where Domri misses about half the times in a deck like this, especially because the mana curve is, or the mana run in this deck is a little bit higher than the average deck, so a Domri would miss quite often. Then there is a slight splash of black. Very recent addition. So far it's been serving very, very well. We've got 2 Underworld Cerberus. What this does is it serves as a must-answer card that you don't want to answer. You can't chump block it because you have to put 3 creatures in front of it, which usually involves killing it and reloading their hand. So these basically serve as an attacking version of Garruk's 4 and 5. Very, very awkward against any of the control decks for sure. Now getting into the mana base, we've got 25 land, 3 Nykthos obviously, 4 Temple of the Abandoned. These Scrylands are very helpful. Sometimes they get a little bit awkward trying to play things on curve, but usually not too big of an issue because in these colors there are only 4 available. 4 Stomping Grounds, obviously. Then to support the black, there's only 6 mana sources in conjunction with the Sylvan Caryatid, so you've got 2 Blood Crypt and 4 Overgrown Tomb, 2 Mountains, and 6 Forests. So that concludes the main deck, 25 land. This is very much almost mono green with a splash of red and a very, very slight hint of black. But the black comes into a lot more play when we start looking at this sideboard. In the board we have 3 Slaughter Games, very, very helpful for removing Supreme Verdict, removing win conditions in various decks such as Elspeth, Aetherling, anything along those lines. A lot of people like to name Sphinx's Revelation with Slaughter Games, but to be honest, in a deck like this, you really don't need to name Sphinx's Revelation, because what they're doing with their Sphinx's Revelation is attempting to buy a couple more turns, which really doesn't amount to much with how big your dudes are. And they're also trying to find either their Supreme Verdicts or whatever win condition they plan on using. And if that isn't in the deck, then their Sphinx's Revelation really isn't actually doing anything. 3 Golgari Charm. Golgari Charm is very, very relevant for a few reasons. The regenerate all creatures usually comes in only as about a 2 of against anything with large scale wrath effects such as Supreme Verdict. Then in the more aggressive matches, all 3 of them are coming in. The white weenies that have been starting to poke up more and more at our local meta, Golgari Charm pretty much just shuts them down right off the bat. And then destroying target enchantment, sometimes relevant, detention sphere, underworld connections, things along those lines, but usually it's modes 1 and 3 that are used the most often. Next we've got Force Shock. This is also to combat the aggressive matches, or even in some cases the mirror matches that rely maybe on Elvish Mystic, because decks that don't have the hexproof dorks, such as Sylvan Caryatid, or maybe they feel they need the extra mana ramp, hurt a lot when you hit them with a shock because they're usually running those Elvish Mystics in place of land. It also takes out enemy Voyaging Satyr and enemy Burning Trees, which can set their Nykthos back a ton. 2 Primeval Bounty. Primeval Bounty comes in the decks that can't really remove enchantments, such as Mono Black, which is otherwise a fairly difficult matchup for this deck. Primeval Bounty is just a very powerful card as it is, and because there isn't a whole lot of draw card and Garruk doesn't grab it, he does need to run 2. Then, dealing with Mono Blue, Mistcutter Hydra is a very powerful card, not necessarily well positioned in a whole lot of cases, that's why there's only 2. Can't be countered, sometimes relevant, but the haste is almost always the most relevant. And then lastly, we've got 1 final Sylvan Primordial. This comes in against a great deal of decks, anything relying on their mana counts, anything relying on non-creature permanents to win, such as Elspeth or things along those lines. So the deck has been performing very, very well. Feel free to give it a try. There aren't a terrible amount of additions that we've considered aside from the Polukranos. But what we are hoping for is that in the next set we get a little bit more access to mana fixing that would allow Whip of Erebos to come in. This deck is currently lacking any way to gain life, so Whip would be very helpful in that, as well as the obvious reasons of re-triggering ETBs or being able to attack for a final swing. Well, hope you enjoyed this deck tech. This has been R.L. Adamson of Rogue Tech, and have a wonderful day.